So, Elaine, thank you so much for being with us. I'm just delighted. I'm honored. I'm excited. Because I know you don't like this word, but you are a legend.
I read that and I thought, pressure. But thank you so much for saying that. I don't always feel that way, but
I know. I mean, I say your name and they go, oh, let's go and talk about purses.
Yeah,
and,
the handbag lady.
Yeah, fashions, and but there's a real other side to you also, and to your life. You know, you just seem so put together, and everything's perfect. And
I mean, yeah, I think that that's such a common sort of misperception of so many people, right? We have this assumption of the life that they lead based on sort of what we see externally. But I mean, I'm glad you kind of brought that up. Like, the reality is, I've faced a lot of adversity in my adult life. And it's, on the one hand been a challenge and created, a lot of stress and grief. But on the other hand, it's really made me who I am today. And it's evolved me into the person that I think ultimately I was always supposed to be. So, yeah, I agree with you that there's always that perception of kind of like, especially in fashion, like glamour, and it's all so great and creative. But the reality is it's all a lot of grunt work, and you take a lot of risk in the fashion industry. Right. And so, but yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into it and what you did.
Yeah, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So I think, I kind of am a believer that you get it through osmosis. I mean, I was watching my dad start companies, and my mother owned a publishing company with my brother. And so I always knew, I think deep down, that I wanted to start my own business. And I was creative. Growing up, my mom was always the one that was encouraging me on, like, you express yourself through fashion, and, that's a form of self-communication. And she was always encouraging me and empowering me. And so I guess I was 30. I had lived in New York. I met my husband in New York and worked for several different brands. And then we came back to Houston, and I just finally got up the courage. I was like, I'm just going to start making these handbags. And I started making them in Brooklyn and just had them shipped to my home, these samples of bags. And
wait, how do you make? I mean, how you actually had material and
I was in the
together,
business all my 20s,
okay.
So I had a little bit of an understanding of sourcing and production because I was on that side of the business. So I was in product development and design in New York, so I knew kind of where I could get leathers, and I actually knew of this manufacturer already. He had done several samples for a client that I had worked for, so it wasn't just total green in that perspective, but
what you were envisioning, what you imagined,
the
was
brand,
new.
and the product. And I had a lot of my inspiration of the product I created really came from my childhood. And my mom was sort of my muse growing up, and she was very ladylike, classic, timeless elegance, and she was very much inspired by the tropics, so every vacation we took was somewhere tropical. So as from a little girl, I was always seeing, in her home, she would do grass cloth walls and palm trees and all of that, and tortoise. And so I knew, I was like, I'm going to develop bags that kind of reflect that sensibility of kind of tropical getaways. So I started making these grass cloth rattan bags and sort of adorning them with like bamboo accent hardware and tortoise. And that's really how the brand started to form. And then my first order was Tootsie's here in Houston.
Well, if you're going to have a first order, I mean, yeah.
I know. And Mickey, Rosemary, God rest his soul, was like, hey, I'll take him in. Let's do like a consignment package and just see. And at that time, I'm like, yeah, anything to get it in front of your customers. And so he brought in several of my bags that I had made, a small lot, I don't even know how many I had of each bag. And they started to sell, and his buyers would call me like, hey, can you get me more? And it just starts to, build on itself. And then, the story goes, I ended up, transferring my production overseas and making much bigger volume, and ended up, with Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue, and really becoming known as more of a resort collection for them. So really that kind of, like I said, that tropical kind of vacation fantasy type of look. So
what a great story. Yeah.
So fun. So,
but it was a lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I grew very organically. stayed small. I was just like, okay, how do I keep, how do I sort of keep this in under control, right? Because I had 2 kids, and my husband actually ended up coming and partnering with me as we started to grow, and ended up doing, wholesale. So I would go to all the trade shows selling the handbags, and then really evolved into more of a brand where I decided that I wanted to have a little more control over the brand and over my products. So I started having my own storefronts. So my first storefront was in Rice Village. It was right under my offices there. And then at that point, I started getting into other categories. So apparel, shoes, jewelry, and then ultimately, ended up with 12 stores in Texas. I had a store in New York at one time. And then everything was vertical. I produced all my own product, employed all of my own people. It was a huge operation for me. And I will probably get into this more, but I have a special needs daughter, which was an immense challenge. And I was always trying to juggle kind of this idea of becoming, this entrepreneur and running this big thing while also being present for her and her needs. So walking around with that kind of internal conflict in a way, kind of that dissonance of like, hey, can I show up for both of these things in the way that I want to? And also I have a son, a neurotypical son. And then, my marriage was so important to me. And I was so close to my parents. And my mother was constantly battling her illness of breast cancer. So, it was a juggling act. And like you opened up saying, it wasn't all glamorous and all fun. There was a lot of times where I really wasn't sure I could do it, right? And show up in the way that I wanted to. And
So you made some really tough decisions about how you were going to show up, and how did that come about?
So we hit kind of this inflection point, gosh, probably like 6 years ago now, where my daughter had, she was hitting those tween years, and she was very aware of her differences and really started to struggle, with mental health issues and loneliness. And we were really, really in crisis care for her. And my daughter has autism and was born with actually a genetic deletion difference. And she's high functioning, but she suffers with frustration and some behaviors around, her communication style and connecting with other people and learning. So we were in kind of a crisis moment with her kind of coming into that age of kind of, I think, really like all of us do, where we really start to understand how we fit into the world, and at the same time that was happening, both of my parents, my mother had a recurrence of breast cancer on her spinal cord. So she was dealing with intense treatment, and my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Oh my gosh.
And I am super, super close to my parents. And that was when, like just thinking about it, I kind of get emotional, but that's when I realized like, okay, I can't do this. I can't show up in all the ways that I need to. And also the fashion business at that time was also going through immense shifts. So, digital is no joke, right? All the online retailers, were delivering products in such ways that it was so hard to compete with, ease and convenience. People started not so much showing up at brick and mortar stores as much. They were really kind of going online, and I had put all of my resources behind these stores, where I was, and I had a nice online business, but nothing compared to what some of my competitors were doing. And so I just had to really take a hard look in the mirror and decide. And my husband, who is my best friend and has always been my number one supporter and fan with me too, saying, look, is this really something that we want to continue doing in this way? Are we able to really give all of ourselves to get this business where we think it needs to be, while also, being there for my daughter, who I knew in my soul that she needed more at that time. And thank God she's doing much better now. But, and then with my parents, coming into that sort of phase of their life where they were needing more care. And we just made the decision to slowly start, closing the stores. And at first we thought we would just sort of keep it all online. But then as things evolved, I really wanted to take a step back, and I wanted to be present for my mom and my dad and my daughter. And, we eventually got my daughter. We transitioned her to a residential therapeutic school that has been a godsend for her. And she's still there and loving it. And then my parents both, eventually, my mom ended up back in chemo, in and out of treatment. And she just passed away last November. And then my father went on like a 6.5-year journey with Alzheimer's and just passed away a year ago. So it's just been, they both passed away at very similar times. They were married 62 years. It doesn't surprise, they like planned it, So yeah, it's been a journey, but I don't regret the decisions I've made. And I think, just something to kind of be transparent with you about is I think our society can sometimes get very caught up into this idea of everything sort of this straight ladder to success, or, we kind of, especially in the West, sort of have this achievement culture that it all has to look a certain way. And especially, with social media and, how quickly we receive information, and it's all sort of, curated. And, but the reality is, we're human beings reacting to life's unpredictability and uncertainty of what we're dealing with. And I just think it's important to sort of tell women, like, you don't have to pretend that, it's all perfect all the time. And you don't have to pretend that there's one way to do something. And if you don't do it that way, you're a failure, because it's not true. I don't really believe in that. I believe that the most authentic sort of whole versions of ourselves is the version that's real and has pivoted and done the things that we've needed to do to survive and made those hard choices that we've all been, in whatever it is in our life, forced to make, that makes us who we are, and it makes our story so layered and complex and interesting. And I just wish more people would talk about those layers, right?
Right.
Yeah. So anyway,
Well, I think
I'm like in therapy right now.
I think what you're saying about this concept of success, and especially as women, and of course I'm quite a bit older than you, but we were never encouraged to be authentic and open, and that was almost a trait of being weak. And you had to be like the guys, and really, all of my stuff was in the 80s and 90s, and you really did have to model the guys. and I think some of that success concept really did us more harm than good in many ways. I don't think we were particularly good role models. And the other thing, and this is just me talking, it's not from anything I know. I think we did a huge disservice to the guys because we didn't let them fall off that white horse.
Right.
They had to be everything.
Yeah.
Because we were everything.
Right.
I mean, it really, when you look at some of the things that were just the cultural things.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Which I have a lot of grace and empathy that we're all, wherever we are kind of in our generation and the cultural sort of norms of our times, like we are products of that. Right. And we have to give ourselves grace that we're all doing the very best we can with sort of the conditions that we're under. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think something I feel is beautiful that's sort of, I think, transforming is people are talking more about the reality, that it's okay, whatever your journey looks like. It's not something that you have to feel that you have to have shame around or reject, that like, oh, if you changed, your business and career for a while and went off and, did something different that what people's expectations were, it doesn't mean that that's a failure. Right. That just means that you're a human being reacting to what your life circumstances are at the time and doing what you feel is right and best for you and your family. And I think that we are talking more and more about that and accepting it, but just hearing you and kind of where you were and talking about the 80s and sort of how we had to mimic men, like I totally agree with you. Like we had to wear these masks and sort of like lack all vulnerability of like, yeah, we can power our way through this. Right. But the reality is, I'm sure there were many days that you would, the real you would be like, wait, is this really healthy? Is this really true? Is this really right? And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. And I just think women have to know that ultimately we're all enough, regardless of anything we have yet to achieve, be, or do.
Mm-hmm.
We're born. Right. We are enough.
And I think for me, that was one of the reasons why being in this type of organization became so important. I had seen so many women truly put themselves second, last, whatever, and it always came out in their health. And it was just like, gosh, we can't keep doing this.
I agree. It manifests. It's so interesting you bring that up. But I do believe in that if you're sort of bottling up something that might not be in true alignment with kind of who you are or your organic path, that I think years and years and years of that, I do think manifests in health issues. It can,
Absolutely.
Stress and, trying to pretend that you can be something sometimes that you really can't. So that's a really big topic is how it impacts our health.
Mm-hmm. So, you said this was 6 years ago, right before COVID?
Yeah, right before COVID. Mm-hmm.
So the timing.
Yeah, actually worked. I know. Isn't that interesting?
It is. Did you have a inner knowing this was coming, or
people have asked me that? It's such an interesting question.
But you moved online.
I know. I did right.
You
COVID.
made this
Isn't
shift.
That interesting? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I knew that the conditions of the landscape of consumer retail and product was changing. Mm-hmm. And it was changing much faster than I think people even realized who were just consumers. It was just like the whole...
You as someone who can see it from up here,
it was changing so fast. We saw, I'm talking within 18 months, 2 years, like we saw our store traffic numbers because we had like counters and we have all this data around people visiting the stores, just change significantly. Sort of the advent of, I'll just say Amazon even, of the ease and convenience of that from, cut in half, the women who are like, oh, I don't need to go fight for parking spots and go into that store anymore. I can just go click a button. Right. I will say over the past 6-7 years, I think more of a balance has gone back now. I think women I'm talking about women because I do women's retail, but I think women have kind of now gone like, okay, wait, we kind of went one extreme where we were like, oh my gosh, this whole digital thing. But now we're seeing women say, I do want to talk to a human being, right. And I do want to touch
I want to touch it. Yes,
handbag.
That is the biggie.
But I think for a while it was really extreme, and then you saw those really successful online retailers do well with that. But I do think now you see brands that really it's back to, look, I have to have the storefronts, and they might not have as much inventory in those storefronts, but they have to have both.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you went back though.
So now for a while I was like, no stores.
Yeah.
And dealing with, I really transitioned into becoming a full-time caregiver for my parents and also my daughter it took us a while to find kind of where we wanted her to be. But I just 2 years ago opened Edit, and I call it Edit by Elaine Turner. And Edit sort of meaning this idea of kind of curating for women sort of the essentials in life, making sure that I could give her, kind of simplifying. I think all of us are so inundated. Life is so crowded in every way.
Wow, and that's a good term.
Yeah, it's such a crowded, from an auditory perspective, visual perspective,
right.
Just for objects. And I was sort of thinking, Edit felt right to me. Keep it simple, keep it easy. And so I named it Edit, and it's just one storefront in the Tanglewood area of Houston. And I've loved it. It kind of gave me a chance to get back to my gift and get back to serving women in the way that I love. And the store has been, a really beautiful combination of creative product, beautiful product for women, but also giving back to the community and hosting charity
Right,
events
and you've
and
done
doing
that
stuff
for the
like
Rose.
this.
Thank you
Yeah.
so very much.
And I would love to do it again.
Oh, we'd love to have you do it
Yes,
again.
I would love that. And so it's been a beautiful experience.
So I'm going to ask this question, and it's kind of for me. When you decided to close the stores, did you go through any grief?
Deep. I went through a deep unraveling of kind of my identity and a sort of a deep self-awareness of really, I humbly say this, of how much I had attached my ego to, I'm a designer and I'm a business owner. And I had to really take a hard look at that aspect of myself and recognize that, yes, those all were things that you could write down on a piece of paper about me, but they ultimately aren't what truly define me. And that really what led me into, during COVID, I did these online workshops for women called Know Your Worth. And it was through some of that self-work that I had done. Because, in life, I people kind of sometimes associate grief with like external, like I lost, my parents, and my daughter actually ended up, leaving and going to this beautiful school that she's at. But I really had a deep grief about losing a sense of myself, or so I thought I had, by closing those stores, and what I really came to light for me, and I still do this work today. I work hard on remembering that, as much as I value and accept all of those parts of myself, that I was a business owner and a designer, and that really I know that outside of all of that, my worth isn't tied into anything that would be put on a resume, if you will, that my worth is inherent to me since the day I was born. Really, it's like a birthright that we all are born, with this idea of that we deserve joy and freedom and dignity and wholeness. And, I can go into more spiritual aspects of that I think that, God brings us here for a reason. And I think that all of our souls are not here to be attached to something that is all about the ego or all about achievement. And I think as Americans, we're very much tied into all of that. But I think that I had to go through sort of a deep dive of kind of an unbecoming, if you will, of realizing that, yes, those are all beautiful things, but that's not the full story of who I am. And I can still serve others and be a designer and be a business owner and be a wife and be a mother, a special needs mother, but that ultimately my soul and my soul's purpose isn't attached to one thing. And I think our society gets super like, oh, you're the Rose, like this is what you do. Like, yes, it is what you do. But there's so much more that's happening behind all of that, and your journey and your story and who you are and what you've dealt with. And I think that it's a very hard work to do because we get so aligned with the roles and responsibilities that we play. But I think when we can tap in to the idea that our worth is something that's so transcendent of anything that we could be or do, any sort of...
How do we do that?
It's hard. It's really hard work. And I do think that, it ties in very heavily with a spiritual component of knowing that you were brought here inherently whole. So meaning that your origin story starts from a place of abundance, not from a place of lack. And I think so many women start from a place of scarcity and lack. Like, I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. And it's from little girl all the way.
Right.
And if there's a way that we could rewrite that story, rewrite that narrative to know that there's really nothing it doesn't, and by the way, this doesn't mean you give up. Like, oh, well, I'm whole. Who cares? That's not what I'm saying. I mean, first of all, once we're here to continue to learn and grow and evolve. But I think when you do your best work in life, so when you show up your best, it's from a place of abundance, not from a place of fear and scarcity. It's from a place of wholeness. And so always reminding myself that I'm already whole. And there's so much more I can do from that place than from a place of fear and scarcity. And I think that so many of us daily are sort of behaviorally acting out from a place of fear and scarcity. Like there's just not enough. I can't do enough. I mean, I still do it. I wake up today texting my husband who's with my daughter, taking her to a doctor's appointment today, saying, oh, I don't think I have enough inventory in yet, at Edit. And it was a scarcity comment. And he's like, Elaine, it's September 9th. Like, we're okay. Like you're getting, like just all of that, like being aware of like, it's always not enough. And I have to and I got in the car. I was
wow.
like,
And that's just even catching what you're saying or being aware of what you're saying and stopping it.
And stopping, like the pause. Like
Yeah.
I got in the car, I was like, okay, I'm eliminating that, and kind of had a mindful moment about talking with you and giving my best today and not doing that game of like, it's not enough, because I think we fall into that trap. So, I think when you ask, how do you do it? I would say it starts from a mindset shift, from a perspective, a change in perspective of that. You start from a place of wholeness and you don't start from a place of lack, and then see how the world shifts around you once you do that.
Is that what you taught in your workshops?
Yes.
Do you still do them?
I don't do the workshops, but I do like a lot of speaking. Like, I'll go out.
And that's how I heard all of this. Thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could carry her around.
In your pocketbook.
But listen, there's a lot of, that's bad. There's so much I wish I could convey to my employees.
Yeah.
Who, gosh, when I look at them, single mothers, many, working and all the things they're having to deal with. And I mean, they're dealing in a very emotional environment. People come in very scared. Women are scared.
Oh, gosh.
And then when we have to tell a woman that she has breast cancer, then my navigators go into work, and I just don't know how my employees do it.
I know.
And I think, I just wish I could be an Elaine saying, "You're whole now. Don't worry about it." Be,
Right.
that.
Well,
it's so important for women to tell each other.
And breast
this.
cancer, I think, just even that journey. I mean, you would, the complexity of being diagnosed with the illness, and then also what comes with that of feeling kind of a lack of. I think there's some identity shifts there when you deal with a chronic illness. I mean, there's all that stuff that we're talking about that's happening in real time with women who are dealing with breast cancer.
And the caregiver that you had to be for how many years?
Yeah.
That's a whole different role.
Yeah. My mom was diagnosed originally my freshman year at University of Texas in 1989. She was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And they were not, it was real scary. My dad had it, we came home, and it was my first semester at UT, and he said, we don't know. It's because at that time, there was no tamoxifen, the chemo, they ended up putting her on experimental chemo. And I remember the doctor telling my dad she might not even live through this chemo. It was so toxic. I mean, things have changed so much. But she got, I think when I look back and see the perspective, my mom had HER2 positive breast cancer, which at the time was very kind of aggressive, but I think it was like 2 years after her diagnosis, tamoxifen had come on the market. And I believe it kind of saved my mom because it was like the perfect drug for her diagnosis. I mean, not that I'm not a doctor. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I just remember that timing. And then she stayed cancer-free for 23 years, and then she fought it, for another however many, several, like 2 decades. But it went to her spine, and then her lungs and all
So
that.
of course you're real aware and you do all your screening.
Oh yeah. Very.
I always have to ask.
Yeah,
You
no,
never
I've done
know.
it all. I did the
Yeah.
genetics test.
Good.
I do all the screening, and my sister and I are both very aware. So, yeah, it's been a front row seat of a lifetime, really journey with breast cancer, and my mom is my hero. I mean, nobody. I mean, she was so optimistic throughout her entire journey, and so brave, and had incredible care here in Houston. And there was also a lot of really, I don't know what the right word is, but a lot of kind of beauty and watching my mom navigate breast cancer the way she did. Kind of awe. She really, really took it head on and never lost her faith and fighting it. I mean, she is literally probably the strongest person that I've ever met in my life watching her.
Yeah.
So, it's like everything. It has all sides to it, right?
Right. And you were there. And so many times that's a gift in itself.
Yeah. MD Anderson is my second home.
Oh, yeah. I bet. All right. We're going to close
Okay.
with what words of wisdom would you like to share? One message to me personally, that will go to everyone.
I mean, I guess it would, kind of fall back on like the work that I feel, universally, but the work that I've done personally of knowing that you're enough. I think that that's a huge message for me. And I don't know if it's just because it's something that's resonated so much with me and sort of my own journey of kind of fighting that idea that I had to do more to be okay.
Right.
But for you and for women to know that, regardless of anything you achieve or that you feel like you've yet to do, that you are whole and that you are here for a reason, and you're sourced from a place of true wholeness. I think that's,
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us.